The fantasy news floweth well. Welcome everybody to another episode of Fantasy News. I am your disheveled goblin host Daniel Green, and today I'm happy to say we have a pretty hardcore episode of Fantasy News to sneak our way on into, pass that perception check, and begin the journey. So let's go ahead and kick it on off with something tangentially related to D&D, and that is because Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman have confirmed that they will be writing a new trilogy for the Dragonlance series, with the first book titled War Wizard, with no confirmed release date yet, unfortunately, but I can make that up for you Dragonlance fans by saying this is not the only Dragonlance news we're getting today. Believe it or not, yes, there is also going to be a new omnibus of the Dragonlance Chronicles put out, and it will be released, we do know that date, February of next year. And interestingly enough, it has an introduction by Joe Manganiello. Did I say it right? Manganiello. Joe Mango. You may know him from his rather substantial acting career, but you may not know he is well known for being a gargantuan fan, not only of Dungeons & Dragons, but Dragonlance, to the point where he was involved with the attempted Dragonlance live-action adaptation, taking on a similar role to Henry Cavill. And if you are slightly confused why I keep referencing D&D while talking about Dragonlance, almost everyone knows that Forgotten Realms takes place canonically within like the D&D multiverse, but also so does Dragonlance. They are unrelated, but under the same like multiverse umbrella.
You both have a right to know why your lives were uprooted, and the more you know, the safer you'll be.
But from here, I'm going to take you on over to our first cover reveal of the day, and that is going to be for Dark Drinker, Gunmetal Gods 4 by Zamil Akhtar, set to be released September 3rd, with art by @meblart. I don't think the Gunmetal Gods covers have missed once. I don't think the titles for Gunmetal Gods have missed once. Though I will say, not even a critique, just a note. Zamil Akhtar started this announcement tweet by saying, quite boldly, "I'll never run out of tentacle monsters for these covers, never!"
Don't make it too easy for me, boys.
Great cover, love this art, love the Gunmetal Gods series, absolutely. Next news. But would it be an episode of Fantasy News without a little bit of an insert from Patrick Leo, who is going to be bringing us two more covers this week, the first of which is going to be for The Blackfire Blade, The Last Legacy 2 by James Logan, with art by Jeff Brown. This is a sequel to the Silver Blood Promise. I'm getting like mildly Mistborn vibes, maybe that's just due to all the smoke in the air, but also the architecture is similar to a lot of the stuff we've seen from Mistborn before, but purple fire in a dark city with badasses on balconies overlooking it. It's like, yeah, that has been done not to death, but a lot in the history of fantasy, but it's so cool though. I don't think it can be done to death. It's just like a universally agreed on badass enough way to have a cover, a panel, what have you. I am wondering though, if I look closely at this, if the kind of like abstractness, basically like overt abstractness of the buildings in the back being these smaller strokes is trying to communicate something. Like to me, that looks like reality kind of shifting or shattering. I haven't read these books, I don't entirely know. Or if it's just an artistic choice to have like the city blend. It looks really interesting though, and I like seeing like the more fire in the distance. But if you are a fan of The Last Legacy, pitch it to me in the comments down below. Might be on my tibber. But in the last reveal we're going to be getting from Patrick Leo here today, we also had him put out the cover reveal for the second book in the Sun Eater series, being reskinned by the Broken Binding. And again, it has that 2 covers in 1 reversible that you can choose which one you prefer. And for me, still, like I'm a betting man, it's still gonna be the reverse side, because you can see in the original, this is for the Howling Dark second book in the Sun Eater series, and the original, I actually like the cover they've chosen here for the primary one more than I did for Empire of Silence, but this like more bold reversible side they're doing with the slow decay, all the better. And I'll even have them up like, here's the primary covers next to each other, here's the secondary. I can see the appeal for both. I will go for the latter. Just, it's such a great idea to have a secondary set of covers inspired by the Rome thing Petrick mentioned last time. Like, that's 10 out of 10 decision. Hi, Broken Binding, not Petrick. You can do no wrong. This is not directed towards you at all. I love you. I would like to address specifically Tibaba. Why? And it's more just a question. Why, when you're putting out dual covers for a book, are you putting both images in one image and then making it not even? Here's what I mean. I didn't crop these wrong. This is what you're putting out. And I just want to let you know, Twitter lets you put more than one image in a tweet. And it also looks more clean and doesn't result in people thinking it's one cover divided in two, which I have come across a surprising amount of time talking about these. So I would just like to say, for the next one, if you may, for your consideration, even them out, two separate, larger, clearer files for people to see. What about that? Huh? There might be a very good reason why they do it this way. I don't know, but it's driving me, as an editor, up the goddamn wall.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Thank you for always sending me the 69th copy of books when you send me them. I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
But for this next news, are you an Inheritance Cycle fan? Well, I'm happy to say that Christopher Paolini has finally drawn out the entire world. Yes, including the mysterious lands the elves hail from and so much more. In fact, the continent where the primary story takes place, Alagasia, looks fairly insignificant. So this is like a cool piece of merch because it's a print you can buy for sale for Inheritance Cycles fans, absolutely. But for me, this is kind of a bigger indication that maybe Paolini might be more aggressively returning to the series beyond just the additional book we've gotten, I think, last year. And I hope that's the case. I mean, Eragon is, yes, one of those like safety series a lot of people come back to as like one of their introductions into the wider fantasy space, but that doesn't mean Paolini can't continue to expand that, make it something that's even more ambitious and how it might be getting fans into larger fantasy worlds or just accessing the full potential of his story. That's just me speculating. I think if I was going to put out a big map to show like the full expanse of the world, that would be because I have stories in me to go and access them or make them relevant to something that may be coming. So I'm hoping to take that as a flag, but just so you know, the entire world has finally received a name, and it is Elia. But this late into the fantasy news, you'll love to see it, we're going to be shifting gears on over to the adaptation space. And I'm thrilled to say that is because we are getting a Neal Stephenson purchasing of rights. I'm not going to boldly say adaptation yet because it's early on in the process, but for his novel Seveneves, Neal Stephenson has seen Legendary TV purchase the rights for the small screen, with Allison Friedman set to executive produce. This isn't a Neal Stephenson story I have read, but the synopsis reads, Seveneves follows how the best scientific minds come to the same conclusion after a meteor shatters the moon into 7 pieces. In 2 years' time, all humanity on Earth will be destroyed by a hard rain that will make the planet uninhabitable. In a feverish race against the inevitable, nations around the globe band together to devise a plan to ensure survival for humanity, initiating a new chapter for mankind. As someone who's a fan of For All Mankind, which is in like a similar space technology vein, loved the Three Body Problem TV show, and also think Mary Robinette Cole's The Calculating Stars was weirdly optimistic despite its tragic beginning. These stories set in, you know, humanity versus great challenge with science as the answer is just like a subgenre of science fiction that always tantalizes me. So I will certainly be watching this when it comes out, and it may bump this Neal Stephenson book way up my TBR. It's been a while since I've read a Stephenson story, and every time I have, I've been really impressed not only by the quality of his writing, but how much he can shift his style between narratives. The guy is a chameleon, and so really hoping we see this go from just beyond purchasing the rights to, and it fully does come to fruition, because I also want to see more science fiction, just like independent novels be adapted and that are not tied to these larger franchises and IPs. I, a lot of the times, think those end up turning out better and are more interesting because they don't have to worry about sequels, stuff like that. They can just be great adaptations. If you like really dry science fiction, I recommend Neal Stephenson's Anathema, but when it comes to Seveneves' accolades, it actually won the Prometheus Award for Best Novel and was featured on President Barack Obama's summer reading list. That's
Prize, to be sure, but a welcome one.
I did not know Barack Obama was a hardcore sci-fi nerd. That warms my heart. That felt good. And we have had our first sneak peek into yet another Game of Thrones spin-off show, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, arriving in 2025. And it looked exactly like you would expect a Game of Thrones spin-off show in the vein of House of the Dragons to look. Certainly has a budget behind it, certainly has a lot of quality production there. But I'm a little nervous, and that's connected to our next story here, and that is because after House of the Dragon, George R. R. Martin has confirmed that there are still 7 Thrones shows in development, which I'm not saying they're milking a dead cow, or whatever the expression is. It's still alive, but they've accessed the udder beyond the nip and are just funneling out the fluid at such a rate. It's a lot. It's a little much. I'm scared. I hope this does well. I love seeing A Song of Ice and Fire continue to get adapted and have varying levels of success, because I think it keeps the conversation around like fantasy and more people picking up fantasy books going. But mainlining stuff like this, especially stories, can become tedious, overdone, and I'm nervous. That's really all I can say to that. The only difference between what's happening to A Song of Ice and Fire and adaptation and like the Marvel timelines you see is no one has bothered to put all these upcoming shows on a timeline yet, because they're so uncertain whether or not they're gonna be made. It feels like they're doing the thing where they're testing reactions to audiences as a whole for whether or not they should continue down with projects, or they judge how well they're coming together. And I just don't see that as a very sustainable or intelligent way to maintain a franchise. But what do I know?
I'm an idiot.
But we're gonna slip away from there though and enter on into the Cosmere with an interesting update for the upcoming Stormlight Archive RPG, because we've gotten our first major look actually inside the game. And believe it or not, in this kind of exploration of what this tabletop RPG is going to be for the players, they get mildly into spoilers for the Stormlight Archive, which I will not be reciting here for obvious reasons, but I am going to take what I can from this article to give you an inclination of what exactly that means for the players. Because specifically when asked about conceiving the game, Sanderson said, "The adventure is answering that question," Sanderson told Polygon. "What happened? Where did it go? What's going on? And you get to be a part of that story. We were looking for an adventure you could do that would intersect with the canon of the books in an interesting way, and allow you to fill in a hole yourself."
That's what she said.
But fortunately, it is also noted that game masters who are afraid of Sanderson's narrative overshadowing anything they may be able to put forward also have a encouraging statement here. When we were teens playing Star Wars, the role-playing game, our first campaign was about how we accidentally killed Luke Skywalker and then had to save the galaxy with no Luke, Sanderson said. We did other campaigns where we said, okay, the canon movies happened. We're not going to interfere with those. We're just there on the Death Star when it's about to blow up and we need to get off. I like the GM having the capacity to do both and anything in between. I wouldn't release an RPG if I didn't want players to mess with my canon. This came with additional notes about how cultural details will be filled in, but I think it's the right approach. The Cosmere has an interesting problem that is being tackled well. Hardcore Cosmere fans would be disappointed if there wasn't actual genuine nuggets of information to be had within this game to flesh out the mythos and be rewarded as a massive Cosmere fan. But you also don't want that to hamper the potential fun and enjoyment from people who maybe have just heard about the Cosmere and would like to try it out through a tabletop RPG format. That's obviously good for sales as well. So that's a good approach to balancing out that problem, and I hope it's successfully done here. And with Brotherwise Games' experience alongside Sanderson's storytelling capacity and experience in tabletop RPGs, it seems like a safe bet. So you know everything I just said. He did it again. So it's not just a Stormlight Archive RPG, but it's actually going to be a full Cosmere RPG, with the Stormlight books shipping in 2025 and the Mistborn books shipping in 2026. Because Brotherwise Games and Dragonsteel are thrilled to announce that the Stormlight RPG game has secretly been the Cosmere role-playing game all along. The Cosmere RPG is a living RPG that will grow as Brandon Sanderson writes new novels and expands his universe. This original system is designed to tell standalone stories in the Stormlight or Mistborn settings, or sweeping world hopper campaigns that move between different worlds and realms. We even know the tiers now. There's going to be an e-reader $60 tier, a digital PDF of the Stormlight World Guide, and a PDF of the Mistborn one, a $95 physical edition of both, and a $195 version that includes everything in the reader tier, plus the Stormlight Handbook, Mistborn Handbook, Stormlight Basic Dice Set, and Plot Deck. The GM $295 tier that includes everything in the player tier, plus Stormlight GM screens, Stonewalker Adventure, Mistborn Legacy Adventure, Level 0 Guide, Adventure Maps Pack, items and NPC cards, punchboard tokens, and a Demiplane source book. And then there's the Collector $385 tier that includes everything in the GM tier, plus Stormlight Liquid Dice and Stormlight Minis Pack. So that's right, it'll be able to consume all of his systems, that you'll be able to play with every Cosmere story amongst each other. It is literally 9 a.m. Fantasy News is supposed to be launching, but I read this at 8:55 a.m. before the news dropped, and everybody... He can't keep getting away with this.
He can't keep getting away with it!
And the final big part of this is Sanderson has announced that this RPG will continue to update as he continues to put out books, and he will be supporting it with Brotherwise games well into the future. And so I'm happy to announce, can you tell by looking into my sleepy eyes, that I will be getting together whenever this releases some Cosmere fan booktubers to run a campaign over on the second channel called Shoveled Goblin. I'm so excited. But from there, we need to go into the section of fantasy news where we go, wow! The dystopian world's kind of happening right now. We're experiencing it. Isn't that fun? And that is because it has been announced that the Atlantic staff is furious about how OpenAI is going to be incorporated in the future for the paper's journalism practices. With a subheadline reading, AI cannot replace journalists, and no publication that aspires to the standards the Atlantic has embodied for more than a century and a half can allow that to happen. And all of this is happening because the Atlantic back in May announced a strategic partnership with OpenAI. And this came with the typical statements you'd expect about how, like, oh, the future of the internet is AI related, and they want to just get ahead of the curve in making that functionality a part of their journalism and publishing practices. Now, conversations around artificial intelligence are too often handled in just black and white, yes and no terms. I have said many times that the future will have AI integrated into so many facets of our life, for better and worse. The job we all face now is to mitigate the worse. And that angle to the story comes in with The Atlantic apparently going to be using the AI to scrape its journalist stories, kind of aggregating them together for readers without necessarily directing them back to the original article, giving credit. So that's not great for the writers. But there's, in addition to that, unaddressed problems with artificial intelligence currently that could skew the news and harm credibility, especially if it's pulling from someone's article, but then adding in those hallucinations you hear about plaguing current artificial intelligence models. Yes, AI just sometimes says shit that's not right. And that is a huge issue that needs to be addressed, especially before these tools are integrated into how we get our news. And I find what the letter is saying here from the staffers of The Atlantic who submitted it to the editor-in-chief to be very reasonable, because they even admit, although we understand that there may be a place at The Atlantic for artificial intelligence, Atlantic staffers must have a voice in how it affects our work. And I don't really see how you can disagree with that. Just as I imagine if management was going to be suddenly massively affected by artificial intelligence stepping on their job, or the editor-in-chief they had to address the letter to. It's fair for workers when massive tools are introduced like this that could seriously change up their day-to-day life, everyday responsibilities, and career trajectory get to sit at the table and talk about what restrictions must be upheld. But the reason we're covering it here? That's an idea that if I was a child would just seem so dystopian. The idea of AI writing the news you handle by just scrimming a bunch of already established stuff written, possibly by people, possibly by other AI, and just... Ugh, wow, it's a weird time to be alive. Although now I'm seeing headlines about how the AI bubble's gonna pop, so... All right, now let's shake off that bit of news and instead talk about something a bit more fun and optimistic regarding follow-through from Will Wick, because he has released the full anime Cradle trailer, and wow, does this look absolutely spectacular. Though I must say, judging by what the Kickstarter actually reached, the final product we will all be getting is not going to be this full animation quality. This was a concept trailer meant to sell the premise. Seeing this quality of work able to be put out, it actually makes me quite hopeful that those animatics that they're going to be doing for the episodes they were able to fund will be of serious quality. And this is big, and probably the actual point of the project, possibly lead to some interest from serious funding, if you know what I mean, without jinxing it. You got it? I think that's a part of this that some people missed out on, which I don't blame them, though if you really look into it, this is a common practice. If you get a teaser or a trailer, even animatics together, and are able to show how excited fans get for it, that is certainly a way, once you continue to shop stuff around, to get some big dogs in the industry interested who might be able to take you to that next level. And what Will Wick has done here looks amazing, and certainly in the vein of something that could bring Cradle to that future. Especially with his standing strong as an independent author for so long, it's a level of success I can't think of hearing of in this specific lit RPG space ever before, and way to lead the genre and be pushing boundaries as a creative. Massive respect. But for this next piece of fantasy news, we're gonna be getting a little bit somber and honoring a legend of the speculative fiction space, and that is because David Lynch has officially said he is no longer able to work in person due to his ongoing battle with emphysema as a result of smoking for so long. Specifically, he said, "Smoking was something that I absolutely loved, but in the end, it bit me. It was a part of the art life for me. The tobacco, the smell of it, and lighting things, and smoking, and going back, and sitting back, and having a smoke, and looking at your work, or thinking about things. Nothing like it in this world is so beautiful," Lynch remarked. "Meanwhile, it's killing me, so I had to quit. Because of COVID, it would be very bad for me to get sick, even with a cold. I like to be amongst things and get ideas there, but I would try to do it remotely, if it comes to it." While he has no current projects apparently in the pipeline, Lynch said he is open to trying to work on something remotely, but I just want to use this as an excuse to take my hat off to an absolute legend of storytelling within what is possible to put to screen. Lynch was a director and writer that I think had a profound impact that is not even fully understood yet on science fiction and fantasy and the blurred lines between it. And while there are certainly some misses in his portfolio, I think almost all people who are willing to push bounds, geniuses who are unconstrained by the rules come before, will inevitably have those, and it doesn't detract from the masterpieces that they do end up crafting. And from what I've seen, it seems that David Lynch's importance is not even being lost on younger generations. More and more people are discovering his projects all the time. And so just from the goblins, I would like to send a whole lot of love David Lynch's way and hope that yes, he is able to pull off, if he would like to, another great project. But this does bring us to our last two stories of the day. The first of which is going to be that yes, the director's cuts for the first and second Rebel Moon movies have hit Netflix. I have already watched them both, and my review is as follows. First, I would like to address something from the last time I brought up Rebel Moon, because I was getting upset by the what I felt to be false advertising of calling this like the Snyder Cut and his true vision. And I want to be clear, the reason I don't like that isn't just some arbitrary Zack Snyder hate, or doesn't come from me not liking the Justice League film. It comes from Netflix not needing to do a director's cut. That's not something that's been done in streaming, and transparently you can see they don't have the restraints of box office needing to get as much people in seats as possible, so keep the movie short. They're just doing it because Snyder Cut. that there's no creativity behind that or anything beyond just a sellout move, in my opinion, trying to capitalize on something. But that's not relevant to my actual thoughts on the Snyder Cut. What do I think of this new two Snyder Cuts that now make viewing Rebel Moon over 6 hours long. The bare minimum expectation I had would be it would fill in plot details that we missed. And to its credit, it did actually make more of the story make coherent sense. Not all of it, but some of it. But all that does is emphasize my point that I believe they kind of made the original one intentionally bad and incomplete so that people would then look forward to this true R-rated vision. And when it comes to the R-rated elements, not a lot of it helped the story at all. I mean, there was attractive people naked, which is nice if you're looking for that, I guess, and pretty graphic sex scenes. So if that's Zack Snyder's vision, I'm not going to tell him it can't be. But when it comes to like blood and gore and swearing, all of it didn't really land as much as it intended. Some of it just seemed to be gross for the sake of being gross, and it really, I figured like it would close all the plot holes, but more than anything, it emphasized how many of the plot holes existed in the first film because of egregious grain footage. And it begs the question, why is there 15 minutes of grain footage instead of this Snyder actual plot solving stuff that should have been in the first movie? Because if you bring in Zack Snyder to Netflix, the reason that's supposed to be appealing is it's going to be a creative project where he has complete creative control. So that makes me ask the question, who at Netflix removed this stuff and instead gave us grain? But in the final story of the day and news I'm genuinely quite conflicted on, we've also seen that the potential Battlestar Galactica reboot is no longer potential. It has been shut down. And part of me thinks good. Like, I do think the first show is even better than a lot of people give it credit for, and the memification of it ended up doing like harm to its legacy, when in reality it was boundary pushing, thought provoking, fell off at times, but as a whole should be a must see of any big science fiction fan. That being said, though, seeing it remade, lightning in a bottle. I don't think you could hit the highs the original show did at its best with the current landscape of television. Instead, what I'd honestly like to see is like a re-edit of the original show, remove the episodes that were obviously just in there due to the era of television it was in, having to hit a certain episode count for a season, the filler, maybe tweak some plot lines and put out like the director. That's a director's cut we do need, I feel like, because there is literal studio mandate things that harmed the total picture of Battlestar Galactica. That I would be more interested in seeing than a reboot. Though, I was excited when I heard it. I thought, there is potential to retell that story, do something different. I don't know, what are you feeling about this in the comments down below? What would you like to see happen with the Battlestar Galactica franchise? I guess is the real question I have, because it's not one I think is dead. It's not one that I think has nothing left in the chamber. I would like to see like a new modern Battlestar Galactica game potentially, whether it's like real-time strategy, even first-person shooter. There's angles this could be taken, and I know there have been attempts at franchising it, but I don't think they're very serious, like not AAA stuff. If you've seen it, let me know your thoughts in the comment down below, and if you haven't seen it, what are your impressions of Battlestar Galactica? I want to know. Is it just the goddamn Office thing?
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
That really does seem to be bigger than Battlestar Galactica, and it's annoying.
Everyone should watch Battlestar Galactica.
Kayla said it.
And today's Indie Pub promo is Primal Furry, Trial of the Berserker by Noel Traver. Pitched as, if you like brutal and bloody action, feats of great personal strength and fortitude, and high-stakes combat, you'll like this one. Orson wants nothing more than to pass the trial and become a berserker. But to do that, he must travel into the wilderness, completely alone, and do battle with the abominations that live in the tundra, a strange, constantly mutating species known only as the Herd. But when Orson makes his way into the icy desert, not everything is as he has been told it would be. The Herd beasts don't all act as he expects. Something strange is going on. The ancient enemy of his people is changing, evolving in new and dangerous ways. They are growing more canny and more deadly, but why? As Orson delves deeper and deeper into enemy territory, he slowly begins to discover new facets to old dangers, challenges that will threaten not only his life, but also his sanity and possibly his very soul. Can he slaughter enough enemies to pass his trial, make it back alive, and become the legendary warrior he knows he can be? Check it out in the links down below.
But this has just been your latest episode of Fantasy Schnoz. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and hit the Patreon if you'd like to support what I do here. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.